Lewis asked about tips for getting a nice combo of mono kick and stereo bass. Kanye Hurricane, for example, which is a great sounding song with like 4 different drum sounds and then the like one synthy.
Yeah, hire circuit to do your bass.
Yeah.
I think that was his contribution to that record.
Yeah, I'll ask.
Epic. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that is an interesting thing. What you give up when you stereoize a bass signal and try to have a mono kick, panning bass doesn't work as well. Basically, the lower the frequency, the more things can phase and interact and sound uncomfortable when you have things that are in the same frequency range. Yeah. And low end is the perfect example of that. If you have a kick that hits with a bass note, and then it says different bass note on the next kick, like 808s, and things will add up. We've talked about this about phase, and things will add up differently. If you have a main bass, like Hurricane has a main kind of like very 2022 808 sound that's sort of like short, like bow, bow, but they're pitchy, like they're changing pitch, and then it has a stereo kind of vibrating, oscillating keyboard
Moog
sound.
Bass or Juno bass like or something.
Yeah, with quite a bit of movement in it. But the way they do that in that song, panning's part of it, but also there just isn't a lot of sub going on in the second bass. You can't really have competing sub frequencies in a song without getting into a lot of trouble quickly. There's creative ways to do things like that. We have to be very careful with it. So basically they're not using 2 bass sounds that are doing the same thing. One's a bit higher, one's a bit filtered, and then one is punchier and lower. And there's also a bunch of sidechain in that song. There's different, that song specifically I think is amazing. And I love that there's like 9 producers and 37 writers, because it's just like, and here's a new drum sound from a new set of producers, and here's a new drum sound.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of the way, all the classic ways I would say is, filtering, sidechain, and just being frequency aware. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Do you do much stereo? Is there much stereo based stuff that you deal with?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch, but I do exactly what you're talking about, and I filter the side basses, fairly high. It depends. I mean, it depends on what the rough felt like and if they're going to miss some of that rumble. But like honestly, stereo basses that are oscillating don't translate well to smaller devices. They add to this like kind of distorted clipping sound that you wouldn't hear on speakers, but like on an iPhone, for example, that happens a lot. AirPods. It also makes you feel claustrophobic in AirPods. You'll get that like tightening of the inner ear when you're listening.
Because there's a phase thing happening at a low frequency, and it makes you kind of...
Yeah, it's not desirable at all. You won't be able to tell on good speakers. So it's more of a guessing game in a lot of ways, unless you have like a Northwood Acoustics like crazy tune room like Sterling or like Rory does, or something like that, where the low end is just so effortlessly perfect all the way down. Almost none of our rooms can really tell those things. So I think I think filtering is the move there, but it's also, again, it's more of a production move. I think that a bass that's going to be buzzy on the side could potentially be up an octave or not hit that root super low that the 808's doing, maybe harmonized with, or just like omitted, or add tension with that bass that's kind of doing a pedal tone that octave higher, and think about it more of an arrangement way than some sort of bass filtering EQ way.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, is arrangement instead of thinking about it as like an EQ move. The thing that I think people know but maybe don't think about as an obvious thing, you can have, a vocal, a choir, or have a bass or something like that, and take out the fundamental frequency and still have the effect of the sound. So that's kind of the one of the big, I was talking to my buddy Moon, a producer in the UK, about background vocals and recording gang vocals by oneself in a room and just stacking up single vocals rather than recording people in a room. And how do you make it feel like people in a room? And a big part of that is, standing away from the mic and adding some reverb and not tuning everything and all that kind of stuff, treating them as a whole. But one of the things is taking off low end. So even if somebody's singing a very low vocal in a choir, because the idea is they're further away, it takes more for bass frequencies to travel. If you lop off some of the low end, you'll still hear the voice, but you won't have that low frequency, the actual low frequency of the vocal as though they're on the mic. Same sort of thing with bass on a song like Hurricane, where if you don't have, I don't know, apparently the guy who mixed it has talked about it a bit, but things like that, I don't know if he literally did this, but if you actually just take off the sub frequencies, you still hear the bass because you hear all the overtones. And so you still get the effect of it, and you can make room for other bass. So filtering doesn't necessarily, you can filter out the low frequencies of an instrument and still hear it very clearly?
I don't know, man. I put 12 hertz in every background vocal. So after I filter to 120 though. So
somebody said something about you making music for elephants, and I like that. I feel like elephant low end is like that might be the brand name.
Try to save the species one cycle at a time.
When you make a piece of custom Jon Castelli tube gear, your company can be elephant low end. I think that's the vibe.
Ooh, elephant lows. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, that's what I do.
Thanks for watching. Just a reminder, all of this content is free. There's no secret knowledge here. There's no Patreon. We don't read ads. We don't have sponsors. We're just trying to build a knowledge base. All that we ask in return is that you share it with somebody. Thanks so much.